Okay.
Sweet. So we're recording. All right. So what kind of got you into the industry, 20 years ago?
Okay. Got me into the industry was, well, I knew I wanted to train people for a living. I just didn't know how I was going to do that. I didn't even know for sure if it was a real job.
Right, right.
I knew it existed to a degree, but I didn't know like it was like I was going to be able to do it. I thought maybe you had to be a coach for like a team, like a professional team, or like for the Olympics and stuff like that. That's in the beginning because that was probably in the mid '90s. Um, so if there was personal trainers out there, I never met any yet because I never ran into them yet. When I was training at a powerhouse gym in high school, maybe there were people there training people, and I just didn't pick up on it. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, um, I had a couple really shitty jobs, and then this guy, I refer to him as my foster brother, but he's not really. I lived with his family for about 2 years. He was working for Coca-Cola, and he got me a job there, and I started working for them. And probably about 6 months in, one of the guys, some guy who's probably in his 40s, he told me like, you should get out of here while you can because the money's good enough to where like you might not leave like a lot of us, and then you're just going to be stuck here and miserable. And I just remembered, I paid attention to that. And at the time I was working out at a powerhouse gym in Monroe, Michigan, which was on my way to work. And they had a sign. Either they had a sign or I just asked. I don't remember now. This was at the probably in this is probably the very beginning of 1999, and I ended up getting the assistant manager job, and then so I was just selling memberships at first, and the Poliquin Principles book came out, and I bought that, and it like changed my training a lot, and I started helping a few people. And then they had like a little thing on the desk where it was international. God, I wish I could remember the name. It was a certification like IFPA or something, International Fitness Professional Association or something. So I thought, okay, let me take this and I'll start training people on the side. And I thought it was going to be like unbelievable content. It sucked. It was horrible. But
Right, right.
what I was already exposed to was so light. It was light years ahead. It was this stuff was all like aerobics and stuff like that. Really, it wasn't
Right.
really talking about weightlifting at all.
Be
But
like a
I just
jazzercise teacher.
it was horrible. But I was
Right,
lucky
right.
because I had at least one good resource, Charles Poliquin. I was really fortunate that I had that. I don't remember if I had too much more at that time. I read Iron Man magazine. I liked a lot. They had some decent stuff in there. Charles wrote in there too, but they had something that came out not too long after that. They call positions of flexion, and that today is still talked about a lot. They just don't call it that. They talk about resistance profiles. Like if it's in the lengthened position or the stretch position, if it's in the contracted position, or if it's in the mid range. And that was really good. That was Jonathan Lawson and Steve Holman, and they had a couple other really good writers in there that I liked a lot on nutrition and a little bit on training. And that's pretty much all I looked at for a while.
What with the Poliquin principles like drew you to it? What did it just seem like it was something you hadn't read before, or was it kind of the first thing you got your hands on?
No, well, it wasn't. It was the first book I probably bought, but before that, I just read a whole bunch of magazines. But when Muscle Media 2000 came out, that was the first magazine that wasn't catered to bodybuilders. It was catered towards athletes, and that was when I was in the Marine Corps. I remember I grabbed one of those November 1995 in the PX, and it was right next to Camp Johnson. It was Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And I never saw it, and I picked it up, and I'm like, holy shit. They were talking about crazy stuff like training training for the 1996 Olympics. A matter of fact, I remember there was one article in one of the magazines. I don't know if it was the first one I saw, but it was about taking Humulin R and creatine. And I remember I tried that. I mean, I was looking back on it. Well, see, the funny thing is back then, like, it wasn't weird to me trying that, but when I told other people, like, they think you're kind of crazy, you know, like you're kind of out there. To me, it was
Right.
it wasn't weird at all, but I could tell you a lot of stories about that, all kinds of funny stories. But the Poliquin principles, well, the thing is I mean, a lot of probably what it said in there, I probably would already was somewhat exposed to from him writing in Muscle Media 2000. And frankly, it's been so long now, I don't remember. But the thing about Charles Poliquin, the stuff he was talking about it was never in any bodybuilding magazine. It wasn't in Flex, Iron Man, whatever was out, Muscle and Fitness. I don't think I read that much, but you know, Tempo, he had a lot of exercises that were kind of unique to me at the time, you know. Yeah, it's been so long that I don't
Right.
remember, like, at the time, but the whole thing was really like kind of revolutionary in my opinion. But so I started doing a lot of those exercises in Tempo, and I think the Tempo was probably like the biggest thing. Like, I mean, you'd start telling people, like, especially slowing down and controlling their eccentric and all these things. Nobody did that. So you'd start doing that with people and giving them a little bit of an explanation on why, and like, it made a huge difference. And it was like it was different than anything anybody was talking about or was reading in, you know, regular, like, you know, powerhouse gyms and stuff. So people were like, whoa, this is different. And it produced results. And so then people started kind of taking notice of you. I had quite a bit of people I was training. I remember there was this much older black guy who really was paying attention to what I was doing. And that felt good. And because he'd been a personal trainer for a while, for a couple of years at least.
Right. And so what was your first true personal training job? Like when was that?
I mean, well, it was kind of that because they let me train anybody I wanted,
Okay.
unless there was somebody to talk to sign up for a membership. And so I was training people more than I was signing people up.
Right.
They didn't really need me a whole lot for what they hired me for. And so they didn't really have a problem with me training people, because they had other people like that would work the front desk and, you know, that would, you know, take money and bring somebody up for like a, you know, whatever they were selling at the time, energy drinks and protein shakes and stuff. So that was probably it. Then I worked for Bally's for a little while, but that was in sales completely. But I only stayed there for about a year, and then I got a job at Lifetime Fitness, and that was full-time training people. That was 2000 and probably 2002, I think 2001 or 2002.
And that's just all Gen Pop people at Lifetime.
Yeah, there might have been like a couple high school athletes sprinkled in occasionally. You know, you get somebody, maybe their mom has their, you know,
Right.
again, it was so long ago, I don't remember. I do remember I trained a baseball kid a little bit, and I don't remember how that happened. But and it was funny though, because when I was there, you know, what was interesting about being there is they probably had 20 other personal trainers. And so when you start to be around more personal trainers back then, I don't know if things have changed, I doubt it, but and you start to hear like what they're listening to or getting influenced by, and what their philosophy on training was, and what they were doing, it was way different. A lot of it was way different than mine. And here, a funny thing that happened to me there is, like, right after I got hired, like, there was a guy, I never met him. He was a personal trainer too. And apparently he was leaving, and I don't know why. He was, you know, obviously found another job or whatnot. Okay. So he was leaving. And I remember I started training some lady, and she had told him, of all the trainers there, I feel like I'm bragging now, but she had told him, all the trainers there, that she should train with me. And I asked him about that later. I was like, hey, how come, why'd you say that? I mean, I've never even met you. We've never had a conversation. He was like, because I paid attention to what you were doing. And I was like really flattered, you know?
Right, right,
I was really flattered. That was really a good feeling, because the funny thing is when I came in there, a lot of my training was it was like bodybuilding. Um,
right.
and back then nobody was doing that. Everybody was kind of doing, the people that were decent to good, anywhere from decent to good, they were starting to get into more of the, what was that? There was a company that had just started, Velocity. I think it was like Velocity Sports Performance,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They just kind of started getting some notoriety and started getting popular in a few places. And I had this one guy, his name was Chris Seiler, and he had a degree. I don't remember if it was exercise science or not. And I thought he was decent. And they were getting into like that type of training or NSCA stuff.
Right.
And then a lot of them though, they were really bad, like really bad. And then not too long after that, they got into NASM stuff. And then NASM was into this kind of like balance training and stuff like that. And I thought it was kind of silly, because at the same time I was reading some stuff that Poliquin was saying about it, because that was starting to get kind of big, right? And he
Right.
was talking about how, if you're standing on a Bosu ball or whatnot, the loads that you're going to have to use are going to be a lot less. And so you're really training like low threshold motor units. They're not really good for hypertrophy. And so I would say that to some people, and they'd kind of look at you like, what do you, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. You could tell like it was a little over their head,
Right.
they were buying it like hook, line, and sinker. And I thought a lot of it was, it didn't make much sense to me. And then I realized not too long after that how trendy the industry was. And then people would confuse what's trendy and assume it was like cutting edge.
Right.
I'm
Right.
like, I don't know, man. This is like, how is standing on one leg and doing a one arm dumbbell side lateral? How's that functional? And this
Right.
stuff over here is because to me, like, when that word came out, like functional training, like to me, I'm like, well, if something's functional, then something's dysfunctional,
Right.
right? So what you're saying is that's functional, but this over here is dysfunctional. Like, can you please explain that to me? And they would give you really bad like answers, like, well, you don't do that, in normal life. You never see that. And I'm like, you don't see any of this shit.
Right. Right.
When do you see
Right.
somebody standing on a fucking half round ball
Yeah.
doing a side lateral too?
Right. When
I'm
you go
like,
to
you
a
can't,
kid's fun house,
yeah. And
bouncing on the fun balls.
they never had an answer. So I'm like, I don't, this is ridiculous.
Right. It's just different to be different more than anything.
Yeah.
So then you ended up being the first employee for the Poliquin Center in Chicago, right? Like
Yeah.
how did that end up coming about?
Well, I was, okay, let's see.
Taking you back in the Wayback Machine now.
Yeah, I was, that was like 2004. So I was working at another powerhouse gym, that had just opened. And I actually was selling memberships before they opened in a plaza, because it opened in a plaza, but they were doing the build out. So we were like a couple stores down with this little location, maybe like 800 square feet, signing people up. And then they finished the build out. Then when we were at it, further down in the plaza with the gym, and I was the manager there. But I think I found it on Charles Poliquin's website, because at the time I was you're on his website daily, just looking for new content, and somehow I found out that he was going to start having these Poliquin Performance Centers open, and I think I either called him or emailed him. I think I emailed him, because I don't know how I would have had his number, but he called me.
Right.
He called me, and I was blown away. I remember taking the call. It was like getting a call from like I don't even know, like,
Right. God,
yeah,
God
you're
calls
like,
you.
it was for me, it
Right.
was, right? You're like, holy
Right. Right.
shit, that's Charles Poliquin, you know?
Right.
And he told me that an intern, I don't remember if he used the word intern, but like he told me Mike Beistel is going to own it, blah, blah, blah. And he told me how to send my resume because I think I remember reading about how Poliquin was doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like even stool samples and doing all this stuff. And I remember because I made a joke. I was like, dude, I'll do anything to get in. I'll do stool samples. And I was
Right.
serious. I would have done
Right.
anything.
Right. Right.
And so I remember when I sent my resume to Mike Beistel and I got a phone call from him, I said the same thing because I was for real. Like, I didn't give a shit how I got in or what, I'll do anything. Just let me be a part of it and learn and pick up some stuff because, I was pretty obsessed with it. And then Mike told me that like there was a ridiculous amount of people that sent their resumes because I told him that I was considering moving to Jacksonville, Florida to try to open up a business down there. And he said, well, don't put your life on hold for this because there's so many applicants. I mean, if I consider like anything with you, I'll call you or something like that, and if you're in
Right.
Jacksonville, no big deal. So I went to Jacksonville and then I was probably there for about maybe not even probably like less than 2 months. And then he did call me and he's like, hey, you want to come up here and like do like a practical like interview in person? And I was like, yeah, of course, so I flew up there and then he lived in like the North Shore suburbs of Chicago in this really nice subdivision. He had this massive house and he had this basement that was decked out with all this badass equipment, like mostly Atlantis, but then he had a couple unique pieces like from Louis Simmons. And I knew who Louis Simmons was. I mean, I didn't meet him or
Right.
anything, but I knew who he was. So I was familiar with West Side Barbell and like the Conjugate stuff. I was reading that at that point too. At some
Right.
point I discovered him too when I was reading his stuff. So he had Danny Richmond there. Danny Richmond was an NHL player for the Blackhawks, and I had to train Danny Richmond. And I think also because I was familiar with all the equipment, like I think Mike was really surprised that I knew like stuff about West Side Barbell and Conjugate stuff too. And
Right.
so he offered me the job that day. And yeah, that was pretty cool. So then I went back and probably was at Jacksonville for like maybe another 2 weeks. And then he called me up, said, hey, do you want to come up here sooner and like help me like get the gym open? I was like, yeah, of course. So then I lived at his house for a while and then helped him get the gym open.
That's crazy. So what year would that have been?
That was 2005.
So you were the first employee there. And
Yeah.
what was it like opening that up? Because how many Poliquin places were there at the time?
I think there was one in Canada. I think in Toronto. There was one in the suburbs of Boston. Art McDermott had one, and I think that's it. I think that's it.
And then Chicago one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then Chicago. Yeah.
Right. So what was it? What was the first couple years like? Because I'm sure they were bringing in some pretty good people for you to learn from, right?
No.
Really?
No.
That's surprising.
No. Charles was there maybe 2 to 4 times, and that was awesome.
Right.
That was like, I mean, again, it was no different than when he called me that one time. You know what I mean? Like, but
Right.
before I took that job, like I did go to like, there was a biosignature seminar in the suburbs of Chicago, right at a Lifetime Fitness. That was 2003. And I flew from Detroit to Chicago for that. So that was the first time I ever met Charles in person and saw him. The guy was massive too. And I was the only time I've probably ever been starstruck because I'm not usually the typical person that I could see like Tom Cruise, I could give a shit,
Right.
But
Right.
with him, it was a big deal. But when I got to when I started working at the Poliquin Performance Center, I thought it was going to be a lot different than what it was. I thought Poliquin was going to be there more. I liked Mike a lot. And his wife, Debbie, I did like her a lot, but she gossiped a lot and talked about everybody behind their back.
Right.
A lot of people left that place because of Debbie, and I was one of them. So I was only there about a year, and then I got fed up with her and didn't want to do something she wanted me to do, and so they got rid of me.
And that's when you opened. And then did you go back to Michigan after that?
No, I went I went to two different gyms. I went to Elias Karas's gym, EFT Sports Performance, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Elias is like a Greek guy, but I mean, I think he grew up in Chicago. When I say Greek, it's not like he's like right off the boat, and from Greece or something, and barely spoke English. And
right.
But he was a big dude. He was young then. He was probably a couple years older than me. He had a ton of athletes there, man. High school, college, pro. Luol Deng was there. His gym was nice, but it wasn't as big as the Poliquin Performance Center. But then he kept getting busier and busier, and then he relocated his gym in Highland Park to a really big place with AstroTurf, and I loved being around that guy. I didn't work for him; I was an independent contractor, but he's such a good dude. And if you went onto his website now, I mean, the guy's big time. He's doing stuff with I can't remember his first name, last name Spielman, the track dude.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing all it's awesome. He's doing all kinds of awesome stuff. And then I worked as an independent contractor at Quads Gym. And then I was gonna get another job at a Lifetime Fitness in the Chicago area, but I knew this guy named Randy Reyes, and something happened. I think somebody was going to sue him because he like worked for this guy, and then he left and he took like his clients, and the guy was going to sue him for stealing his clients, right? Because he worked for another guy, and he wasn't a United States citizen. He was from Canada, so he got all freaked out, and he was going to go back to Canada. So he was like, "Hey, do you want my clients?" And I was like, yeah, okay. And so then I ended up doing that. And then 2007-ish, I moved back to Michigan to open up a gym with my friend Ben Knapp.
And that was in 2007. And how long were you in Michigan before you ended up coming back to Chicago?
Probably 6 to 8 months. Cause we had no idea. We didn't know anything about running a gym. And I remember because I was at Elias Karas's gym and it was massive. And, I was at the Poliquin Performance Center. So you get all these ideas in your head. Like you want all the best stuff, right? You want all the best equipment. You want the big space. You want the AstroTurf, but you didn't realize anything about like building a business and like trying to build a capacity problem first and then relocating. So it's kind of like I always called it like Field of Dreams, right? Build it and they will come.
Right.
The problem is, are they going to come fast enough to compensate for all the expenses, right?
Right.
And they weren't. And so then I moved back to Chicago, and then Ben, he's the one that bought all the equipment. He took a loan from the bank, so he kept it all. He relocated, and I think he must have moved 2 or 3 times. Now he's got a gym called Omnivo, so he's doing well. But I was like, I didn't know what was going to happen, and Chicago is a lot better than like the suburbs of Detroit. So I'm like, well, if I have to find a job, I'm going to go back to Chicago. So I went back there, and then I ended up doing a couple things here and there. I ended up working on a Discovery Channel, like TV show. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But then I went right back to my jujitsu school I trained at, and they had a gym in the basement. And one of my old clients, Ryan, I don't think he wasn't married yet. He's married to the woman now, but his girlfriend got a hold of me, and she was like, Ryan's really depressed and stuff. And so can you train him? And I was like, yeah, of course. But she said he was too embarrassed to go back to Quad's gym because he gained a bunch of weight. And I was like, I got the perfect thing, man. I'm in the bottom of a jiu-jitsu school in the basement. Nobody's going to know I'm here. And she was like, perfect. And I got a hold of him. he came over to the jiu-jitsu school, and then I started training a fair amount of the jiu-jitsu people too. And then they had a vacancy at the other end of the block. My friends that owned the jiu-jitsu school, their mom opened up a realty place because there was two ground level retail like things on the bottom of a condo, right? And she had one of them, and there was the next one over was vacant. So I talked to her, and then she talked to the landlord, and Ryan and I. Ryan was my partner at first. We got the space, and probably a couple months in, we had some differences on the business, and he thought it was going to like ruin our friendship, and so he let me buy him out, and then it was all mine. But the funny thing is I mean, I kind of did ruin our friendship because it didn't on my end, but I guess, you know, he was pissed off about everything, but never told me. And it's like, that's a bummer, but
Right. So
You
then
know?
you open up, and is that when you open up Urban Strength
Yeah.
Institute? Is that what you
Yeah.
call it? Like
Yeah.
this?
That's
So
when I
got it.
opened that up. Yeah.
Did-
You know what's
did-
funny about the
Go ahead.
names too is it's funny because when I opened up the gym in Michigan with Ben, it was called GTS, which was Grayson Training Systems. Because I was the guy, like what I was in charge of was like I had all the knowledge, right? Because my friend Ben never trained anybody yet, but
Right.
he owned a nutrition store, and he wanted to get into some training and other things. And so I was coming in to kind of be the guy in charge of the gym and teach anybody else like him, or like if we have any employees or whatever. And so we named it that. But because at the time, like you had everybody was naming stuff training systems. That was like the big thing at the time. You know,
Right.
like Elite FTS, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Which you're aware of. You had all these, but I was one of the first, I'll have to say, like, but I didn't create the idea of like the training systems that I didn't create. I jumped on that too, but I jumped on it, and then I saw a lot of people were thinking like me because it was everywhere.
Right.
You know, I don't know if you noticed that back then, but so then when I opened up Urban Strength Institute, I think and I think Charles Poliquin changed it from Pollock Performance Institute to something else. But then I thought of the institute, right?
Right.
Because I was like, yeah, I don't know. You know how they say like you know, when you really admire somebody, you kind of mimic them. And I can't
Right.
remember the saying. There's the cliche, like the saying, like the flattery thing or something like that or whatever. But
Yeah. Like mimicry is the most sincerest form of
yes,
flattery or something like that.
that's exactly what I mean. So that's
Yeah.
where it came from. That's where the idea of the name came from. And I thought it was great at the time for a few years. And then I wasn't crazy about the name, but I do remember I had this guy, this actor. I had a couple actors from Chicago, and they're big time, man. Like, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do because you're from that area, but you know how like Chicago's really big on like what would you call that? Like theater, right?
Yeah.
It's a really big, kind of like New York, but probably not as big as New York. But
Right.
so I had a couple people that were like big, like that's like they were doing like making big money. And this guy Jared Zimmerman, he was like, I really like the name Urban Strength Institute because I like the word institute because you teach people all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, man. I'm glad. So when I had other people say that, I like the name a little bit more because I was starting to not be crazy about the name. And that's a weird thing when you open up a gym. It's when you try to come up with a name, man. It's really important, man. It might sound like nobody really thinks about that until they do it. But if you're going to brand it and you want to like really believe in it and like be inspired by it, like names matter, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. So were you getting a lot of your clients initially from the jiu-jitsu school down the street? Like,
Yeah.
is that how you kind of became the fight coach?
kind of.
Because you're just getting all those jiu-jitsu people?
Well, I mean, I was never a fight coach. What do you mean by that?
Well,
So,
like you're just getting you're like the strength conditioning coach for a lot of fighters, right? Like a lot of
yeah, there really wasn't any fighters yet. It was mostly just just grapplers. Like some
Okay.
people, but I had quite a few of them that competed and really did really well. Like they were really good competitors in jujitsu. Eventually I had a couple of fighters, but when I went to the jujitsu school and I talked to the owners, Adam and Eddie Redzovic. I remember I gave them Eric Cressy and Mike Robertson their DVD, Magnificent Mobility, because I remember when we would do our warm-ups, I'm like, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. They're probably not going to listen to this, but I remember thinking, this is really bad. Like, this is awful. So I gave them that to try to see if I could help with a better way to warm up. Because we would warm up for like 30 minutes and it was brutal. People were doing all these tumbling rolls, getting dizzy. You'd feel like crap. I'm like, why are we warming up for 30 minutes and then not getting enough training in with jujitsu when we could warm up for a lot less, and it would be better because you're wasting a lot of time and doing a lot of dumb stuff. Because then we would stretch too. I'm like, why would you try to like cause excitation of your body and get you amped up and then stretch and then try to relax your body? So I gave them that and I started training them. And then when I started to talk to other people there, they started calling you know, like a mad scientist. That was the thing. There was a thing going around in the time with like a couple different people that were coaches in MMA, like Joel Jameson was probably one of them, but so because they came out with a magazine called Fighter, I think it was Fighter, and you'd start to hear about some of the coaches and what they were doing with the athletes, and that term got popular for some reason. Joe Rogan would always say it. He's like a mad scientist, and then so somebody called me that.
Right.
I'm like, which is like, I mean, again, I was flattered, but you're like, it's kind of silly. It's like, you just don't know. You just don't understand. You know, they don't know what they don't know, you know?
Right.
And I remember Eddie that owned it, Adam's older brother, Eddie, the older of the two brothers. I remember him saying one time, like, we've had a lot of guys come in here like you, but nobody talked like you. And he said, we never really believed any of the other stuff people said because it didn't sound right. But that was, again, a huge compliment. I was really flattered. And then I was at the other end of the block for like 11 and a half years. And so you just start getting results with people, and then people start talking about you, you know, especially with jujitsu, because you'd get these guys that'd be like, what the hell, man? Like, this dude is way stronger on the mats, like, you know.
Right.
So you'd get those guys, and then, you know, people in the neighborhood would notice that you have a gym there. So you'd get local people, General Pop and whatnot, and it kept growing. And that's one reason why I'm kind of pissed that I left, honestly, because things were like going super good. I mean, Juliana Pena was there. It was probably
how did she come from the jujitsu school? Like, was it word of mouth from? Okay.
She got word of mouth from there because her daughter's dad, I used to train, and his name's Luis Alejandre, and he was from jujitsu. So I knew him from jujitsu, and he trained with me in the very beginning. And so he had told her about me and showed up with her. And if I'd have probably stayed, it would have blown up. I was doing well.
Right.
I was doing like really well. So I'm really sometimes pissed off that I took off in some ways. But I'd been in Chicago for 15 years, and I had the gym for a little over 11. And I think I was starting to get bored. And I've been doing this for quite some time now. And, you know, usually I never got bored because there's so much to learn and stuff, but I just needed something different, you know, which why I don't know if we'll have enough time to talk about this today, because the 40 minutes will probably be up, but that's why I keep talking to you about that Proteus motion thing. And that's why I can't stop obsessing about this thing. You know,
no, we'll have to do that for the next one, because that thing does look pretty cool. I was looking at it today and I was like, man, this thing it looks pretty
it's insane,
pretty
dude.
legit.
It would completely revolutionize training. And I'm like the type of guy that I get really obsessed. Like, if somebody could read my mind, like, besides thinking about my family, it's all training, and with training equipment as well. I really obsess about equipment, and I'm like so obsessed about this. It's like agonizing. Like,
Right.
it's like,
Right.
it's like really bothering me because I can't afford it yet. It's underpriced in my opinion. And we'll talk about that more. But I would have turned my gym in Chicago, Urban Strength Institute, into more of a performance like lab. I mean,
Yeah.
I got Juliana Pena, Juve lights. I would have got that for me. I think I should have like just overhauled the whole thing and just kind of changed my business model and just changed a couple things up. And I think I would have been making even more money and had a ton of fun. And now I've had my gym here since May of 2021, and I'm still building it up. Kind of like I did with Urban Strength Institute, but my budget to buy equipment right now is real low. So you got to either buy really small things or you got to save up to buy big things. And like, God willing, it'll build up like Urban Strength Institute did, and I'll get bigger things. And then the training will keep getting better and better. And finally, finally, I'll have enough money and I will get this Proteus motion thing. Like right now, like, I mean, I'm I was making a joke with you the other day. I'm like willing to almost do anything to get this.
Yeah.
I've even thought like really dumb stuff. Like I know that I would never do, but I start thinking like, I mean, how hard would it really be to rob a bank? You know, even like I know I'm not really gonna do it, but it starts
Right.
making you, because you start thinking this crazy. Because that no, I'm
Right.
serious, because that's how like obsessed I get. Like I'm not really gonna rob a bank, but I'll start
Right.
thinking crazy shit. Like, well, but I wonder if it really is easier than it is. You know, like
Right.
what would it be like?
It's
And then
Halloween season. I could find a mask.
dude, it's crazy. And I'll have these crazy daydreams about, crap. And it's like really like, it's really like almost like it's painful, man. Like,
Yeah.
that's why I'm making like it sounds funny, but it really is agonizing.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we'll definitely do that one. That'll be a good one because I want to learn more about it too.
Yeah, I think maybe let's talk about that, and we'll talk about a lot of the things that it would fix with my training and some of the stuff that I'm currently doing, and where there's why I'm not super like satisfied.
Right.
And talk about maybe how the Proteus motion solves those problems, because I really do want to talk about this thing because it's insane too. And then maybe I'll get lucky and they'll hear me talking about it.
Yeah,
And maybe
for
I
sure.
could somehow,
We can send it to them.
dude, I will. I mean, I'm gonna stay on these people. I want to do it to where they realize I'm serious. Like maybe like I can figure out maybe there's an opportunity somewhere there. But
Right.
I want to do it to the point where that, you're not pissing somebody off either. And like this dude's, I
Right.
don't think that would happen though, because I think like if you're good at like good salesmen, they don't take no for an answer. And it's like the way I'm looking at it is I'm just trying to sell you why I need this thing and why I'll do anything to get it. Maybe I can be an asset to the company. I think that we have less than a minute though. So
Yeah.
maybe we should just end it there.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we can talk offline, and that was good, man. I like that a lot.
Yeah, we'll pick up
More
next
cuts.
time somewhere in there or where we left off.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
All right, Andy, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, dude. See ya.
Bye.